There it is. Lafourche Parish Government, Megan Champagne. Is she here? No. Jefferson Parish Government, Michelle Gonzalez. Jason Subbing. Okay. Plaquemines Parish, Kimberly Buck. She's still here. All right, for fisheries, oyster fisheries representative, Pete Vinovich.
Here.
Did I get it closer this time? All right. Shrimp fisheries upper basin, we did not have a rep filled for this year, just FYI. Shrimp fisheries lower basin, AC Cooper. Barataria, Terrebonne National Estuary Program, Andrew Barron. And then marsh property owners, Frank Elmer. Here. Did I miss one? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Recreational fisheries, Maurice Nakwan. Not sorry. Already checked you off. All right, we're good. Have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Again, I want to welcome everyone. Just a couple housekeeping notes for anyone watching online. Please submit your comments to coastal@la.gov. Again, coastal@la.gov, and in the subject line, put DPAC. For members of the committee, you'll probably notice we don't have enough microphones for everyone, so please share, and for the benefit of the court reporter, announce your name and who you're with again as we go to have comments or questions. And just for me, I'm obviously probably one of the newest members of the committee. Again, my name is Michael Hare. I have the pleasure of being the executive director for CPRA. It's a pleasure to be with you on this Friday morning, and appreciate the work that this committee's been doing for many, many years, and the technical working group updates we'll hear, and the continued use of data and figuring out the best way to maximize and really truly make these pieces of infrastructure as efficient as possible. And before we turn over to the rest of our agenda, I do want to yield very briefly to Mr. Gordon Dove, who serves for GOCA and is the chair of our CPRA board. Mr. Dove.
Thank you very much, and thank everyone for being here. And on behalf of Governor Jeff Landry and the GOCA board, the Governor's Office of Coastal Activities, my name is Gordon Dove. Just give you a little background on me. I was in the legislature from 04 to 16. I was originally on the CPRA board at its inception, and and I'm also on the governor's cabinet, Governor Jeff Landry's cabinet. So we thank everyone for being here, and on behalf of CPRA, myself and Mike Head, executive director, we look forward to this meeting and anything that our agencies, CPRA or the GOCA board, can do. Please don't feel free to contact us, and we're here to serve the public and do what's best interest of the great people of the state of Louisiana. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dove. To the committee members, I believe we shared the minutes from last year's meeting in advance. We'll go to agenda item 2, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve? Got 1 and 2 there. Any discussion by the committee on the minutes? Seeing no discussion, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Then on to agenda item 3, the approval of the 2025 DPAC meeting agenda. A motion to approve. And a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The agenda is approved. So we'll move on to item 4, our invited speakers. We will have 2 today. Again, calling up Mr. Jason Adrians. I hope I got the name right that time. This is a monitoring of juvenile and young of the year assessment species through saltwater electrofishing from LDWF.
We're waiting on someone from IT, sorry.
Well, Jason, I know it may be a little hard, but maybe I would invite you up to the podium anyway. and you can just start to share a little bit of the overview with the board or with the committee once we get your formal slides up.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee. My name is Jason Adrians with Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries. And the presentation I have for you, once we get it up here, is on a new novel electrofishing vessel that we're using. And the idea is for us to monitor young of the year and juvenile stock assessment species within our basins. Now we're doing this on a trial basin, actually in the Barataria Basin, a trial basis, in the Barataria Basin to compare this to seine catches. And there's some history I'll go into in the presentation of how we got to this vessel we're using now and some expected benefits. But hopefully once we get it up, I can go into that because I've got some really neat pictures for y'all.
Well, hopefully we have someone from IT coming in soon. I will get to the punchline very quickly and just say on behalf of CPRA, and I said at our last meeting, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn for Secretary Bosworth. What this is affording us in data is truly remarkable. It has often been described to me as just like the most amazing thing, which makes me question exactly how great it is, but I've been told I've got to get on a boat and go see it. And certainly one of the CPRA board members, Mr. Chad Corville, has been a long proponent of this, and we continue to help support LDWF in this mission and invest with them. So I look forward to getting on a boat, not in December, and going out there to see this firsthand. And it looks like we have proof of life on a TV, so that's good. All right, Mr. Jason, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So I'll skip the title slide since we already introduced that. So traditionally, the way we've sampled marsh edge and shoreline, aside from some of our other nets, but more of a community composition sampling is our seine, our 50-foot bag seine. We've sampled that in our finfish program since 1985. However, one thing we're seeing as our marsh continues to degrade is that's becoming problematic for that gear. This is a gear that you set out in the water and you walk it into the shoreline and you rely on the slope of that shoreline to move all those fish into that net. So when you pull it up on the shore, they're there. However, as you can see in these pictures, as we hit that fragmented marsh, and you don't have a straight sloping edge, it just becomes more difficult to use that gear and it becomes more inefficient, in particular for our stock assessment species. So how did we get to this? Back in 2016, we applied for a grant through the State Wildlife Grant Program to look at salt marsh top minnow. This was a species that was an NGO had petitioned to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to list as threatened or endangered. All in previous years for data, and we realized we do the same samples, but not in quantity. We do have some other locations where they were caught in significant quantities, and we saw that there was a sampling gap period. The gear being used to gather these data were not efficient at catching salt marsh top minnow. So we went down the route of saltwater electrofishing. How did we start this? We used this unit made by Smith Root called a 9.0 GPP electrofisher. Now, I didn't note in the previous meeting that this unit's no longer made, so that's one of the problems with continuing this type of sampling. And it was also only effective to about 19 parts per thousand. So while you could use it on a year like last year's trout year, it would have been problematic. The end result of that sampling is we were able to develop a population density model for salt marsh top minnow. That information was provided to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Eventually, the petition was recalled to list that species, so we like to think we had a little part in doing that. We began using this same gear under the coastwide sampling agreement with CPRA in 2018. We continued that through 2023. We realized, and so we ran this side by side with all our seine sampling in the Barataria Basin. And from doing that for those years, we definitely saw an increased catch rate in those assessment species, the ones we were concerned about. There was a drop off in 2 species compared to the seines, and I'll show you that in a table coming up here next. But that is likely a result of this gear. So I didn't mention earlier, this gear, when you were shocking, it used a pole with a hoop, with an electric hoop on it, and you follow that with the dip net. So it was a limited portion of the shoreline that you could sample with this unit. So here's a result of that sampling from 2018 to 2023. You can see there the increases in some of those assessment species catch per unit efforts, in particular, red drum, spotted sea trout, southern flounder. You can see those were quite dramatic. You do see there is a negative CPUE change between seines and the electrode fisher for black drum and Gulf menhaden. However, I think with this new technology we're using that I'll explain in a few slides, those may go down in terms of they'll move more positive than they are right now. That bottom left-hand graphic you see there, the green is the electrode fishing catch per unit effort, and the blue is the traditional seine sampling. So you can see across a variety of species the difference in the 2 gears. For the most part, the electrode fisher had higher CPUEs for most things except a few, but you still are sampling the same community composition. So when that grant ended, or when the work with CPRA ended to do the saltwater electrode fishing, we were made aware about the same time of this prototype unit made by Midwest Lake called the Infinity Electrode Fisher. We had folks that were able to get on that vessel. They brought it down to Lake Charles from Missouri to try it out. And there was and the hope is that if we had something that could sample this unit, I neglected to mention last meeting, this unit will shock from 0 parts per 1,000 up to full seawater. So the entire range of salinity can be sampled with it. And when it was brought down to Lake Charles, this is just a sampling of some of the things it could do. You see over there on the left is a small spotted sea trout, a young of the year. Those are things we typically don't see in the same samples, not in quantity. You can also see a young of the year red drum in the middle picture. And then not only does it sample those species, biomass in general is higher in sampling. You can see there on the right, that's a tub of Gulf menhaden across a variety of size classes. So we embarked on getting some funding, and the legislature graciously appropriated some funding for us through our Artificial Reef Trust Fund, and we were able to purchase the first prototype model of this electrode fisher. You see it there on the left. And we started sampling at 16 of the established seine sites in Barataria in July of this year. Over on the right, you can see the size range of spotted sea trout that we're picking up in this, as small as almost an inch in size spotted sea trout. So this thing is doing everything we thought it would do and more. What are some expected benefits? So hopefully going into the future, if we can have more of these units across the coast in each of our basins, the idea is to develop a robust time series and index of relative abundance for those stock assessment species at that young of the year or juvenile stage class that we can then correlate to our other sampling. So right now we have sampling that does a good job, the gill nets and tremble nets, for example, of getting fish, those stock assessment species at the size where they recruit to the fishery. So older, 1-year-olds or older. We don't have a good link because the seine samples are not very efficient for these stock assessment species. We don't have a good link from young of the year to those recruits and what goes on in between there. And the idea is that hopefully if we develop this index, we can have a better predictor of year class strength and allow us to be a little more proactive in our management instead of reactive. And we can also monitor inshore artificial reefs that are shallower with this technology. One of the other things it can do that traditional net sampling, seines, gills, tremmels, or drop samplers can't do is you can pull this unit directly up to living shoreline or rocks that have been used for coastal restoration projects. And you can sample the communities that are colonizing those new projects. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Turn to the committee members for any questions or comments.
Thanks, Jason. That looks very promising. So you were starting on Barataria Basin. Are you thinking about expanding to other basins or just focusing on?
Yeah, so with this unit, we'll start leapfrogging since we only have one. We started in the Barataria Basin. We'll run a year in that, and then we'll move to east of the river into the Pontchartrain Basin after that, starting July of next year. And then after that, we'll move to another basin. Hopefully by then we've acquired some more.
Can this presentation be shared with the committee?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why we can't provide it.
Thank you.
Yes. So Jason, I have a question. Again, I think if I saw correctly in your graph, that bottom left graph of the different species of comparison between seine and electrofishing. Yeah. Pull it up, please. Am I seeing it right that hardhead catfish were not sampled well with electrofishing?
Well, this was, if you remember, this is that previous 9.0 GPP. So this is not, these are data from that 2018 to 23 work that we did through the coastwide sampling with that Smith Root unit. This is not the new unit. We'll be presenting some of that data at our January commission.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the clarification.
Jason, do you anticipate that catfish will be able to be sampled with this new unit?
Yes, we've already seen some catfish in our samples.
Because I know like in freshwater with the older units, catfish tend to not be affected by electrosampling as much as other fish. They're not as susceptible.
Yeah, and some of that has to do with the settings of the unit as well.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments from the committee? Again, I want to thank you, Jason, and just express our gratitude to LDWF for looking for best science, best technology, and getting us the best data to help inform our decisions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for having us.
Next up, we'll have a presentation on the oyster metapopulation modeling for Louisiana's estuaries. Brady Carter.
Happy Friday, everyone. Glad y'all got us down here for to provide some insight into some of the stuff we do. I'm gonna present on the oyster modeling project that we're getting close to wrapping up by the end of the year.
Oh.
You don't want me to start pushing buttons. It works. So.
I just want to leave my mug.
So I guess she's getting it up. We're again working on an oyster metapopulation model for Louisiana's estuaries. It's actually a Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group project, but it's out of the Monitoring and Adaptive Management pot of funds, not the oyster specific funds that Louisiana was awarded. And this first slide shows the public and private contractors, but only I can see it, so y'all won't see that yet. But we have like 7 different public and private agencies, LSU, Water Institute, Dynamic Solutions, etc. So again, it's the oyster metapopulation model for Louisiana's estuaries. Oysters is in decline. It's not just one reef, it seems to be across Louisiana. It's something we noticed probably starting to happen a little before the spill, but the oil spill really exacerbated the effect. So in 2020, Louisiana came up with an oyster strategic plan, putting together some ideas of how we may, turn this around and get back to being a really productive oyster area. So this is all the different strategies in the plan. One particular that we'll focus on is rootstock reefs, something new for Louisiana, but is making a network of actual spawn and stock reefs, large oysters that are protected from harvest. So we always have something to provide larvae, at times of thin. So in the past, identification of just suitable oyster habitats seemed to be enough to really get it going, but something's changed, something's different as erosion or whatever you may have has ticked up. We've noticed that, restoration's not as, fruitful, I guess. So we need to get, besides just where they may grow, but how do they connect, the reef connectivity? So that's what this project is really about. So this kind of sums it up really well, is that local populations on their own are not stable. To a balance, local expansion and colonization. These species and a social organism grow off a generation. It's the only way they can survive, and they gain elevation by just a constant grow and dying. So reefs are consistently productive. Water's, hydrology changes, that affects reefs, but it doesn't take much to come back. So that's kind of what we're getting into, is that look at how each individual reef connects to the other and how they can get themselves through dry time. But this just represents the full oyster life cycle at a population of so, and I think the next slide may have the different parts. So we developed an adaptable population model for these estuaries to help us inform management and restoration decisions. Transformer model mechanism. So we put together, add that as components to it. Like I mentioned, to show you the full oyster life cycle, which takes hydrodynamic models and water quality models, thinking master plan stuff, salinities. We also have an oyster larval transport model. The hydro models feed into that, which where and how far oyster larvae can go. And then larvae are forced and set out there, and also individual reef-based models. So we're growing, we're reproducing, like it takes the oysters through multiple life cycles. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's a whole lot, but just trying to get through this. That you have a lot of information. So this is kind of all three of them together. So you start with the hydro model, which regional problems, and we're doing it for three different basins now, estuaries basins. So we have North Pontchartrain, Barataria, and Comanche Lake. Barataria was the first one. There's so much data in Barataria from all the different projects that should have been in there. Great good information, and a lot of the hydro stuff's been validated and stuff. So it was really a lot of information there for us to start. And it worked out well since David Swan is in Barataria. So this is kind of all three of those models, the large transport model, the Shankus model, and then USGS and other energetic models, these individual based models. So this project gets all three of these things together, and it puts out some pretty interesting outputs. Let's see. We're going to start in Calcasieu. So this is the Calcasieu domain, the model domain. ROMS is the regional geographic model system. I think it's the hydro model ROMS. So it started with 30-meter resolution, and then to set up our IBM point models, we had to figure out which size grid we would use. And we did that based on the hydrologic data. So you use something that'll show if it was too small, Earth would look the same. So we would find that size that would see it. So again, temperature. So we were looking at salinities less than 5 when temperatures are high, and then salinities less than 1 when temperatures are low. And looking at those, we came up with 1 kilometer grid. So that's what's shown here. And the dots in the middle are reef point sources. So basically, without knowing exactly how much was the resource, anything like that across the board, we're assuming that the bottoms are the same. So we're just looking at strictly the driving, larval, transport, and growth and reproduction on individual reefs. So this Calcasieu Lake has 232 total kilometer grid cells that we can source and sell. Next number shows the train. We use the Delta 3D flexible mesh model. I guess I should back up and say the hydro models are all three-dimensional. So we have salinity, temperature, velocity. Source of lava can move up and down, kind of the extent of their. So all these are three-dimensional results, the output. So take the outputs of the different hydro models through here. This is the model domain for both train that we use. And then the next one will show the reef model. So in Northern Pontchartrain to get that good difference where we could really see a difference. There are 5 kilometer grids. So 5 kilometer settlement points for the larval transport. So now we get the Barataria. This one used the ROMS hydro model, 200 resolution, and we parsed it down into cells and Barataria. There's 332 of them that will be used for sourcing. Okay, so we'll go a little bit further with the Barataria. So again, I said we validate because of the amount of data that was available. So at the top, you just see that it's, so this is us going through the steps of validating functionality to match wild fishery that was collected in the basin. So this is, you know what, this model is, everything's showing us what we collected back then. The years for this 2014 to 2018, again, that hydro data was already worked through and was good to go, so we used those outputs. So we validated the model was showing us what we expected. So the larval transport model can be used to identify either reefs or source in larvae and may land somewhere else, but also what reefs, the 2 kilometers and 1 kilometer here. See, I just where you're coming from and then where they landed. So I actually have a little video of next who runs, but this is actually animation of the larval transport model. I don't know. The larvae being sourced. So this is over 40 larvae are sourced from each reef. So you'll see it starts off slow to in early April, and you can see it really starting to pick up. Literature is 21 days that they can go until they have to sell. So once we hit around May, you'll start to see some green and some black, which are hard to see because it's right on the edges. It's really worth look. It's pretty crazy to see. So this is riding the hydro data that we fed it as what is moving. You know, eventually, if they turn green, it settles in an area. If they turn black, you know, it's not a suitable spot or more temperature or something didn't allow them to settle. It's just a good way of showing, you know, how with that larval is doing. It's only 40 days. We were in this from 2014 to 2018, so it's pretty bad. I mean, we're getting close, and I did get some results yesterday that I put in here. I haven't put that on yet, so it's kind of exciting to see what we have coming. We're almost done, so you can see it's starting to settle. And it's kind of right across the bay. Hackberry Bay is kind of right there, which is our oyster ground. All right, so then you see the one up the black, you get the green. So it is successfully settled. So here again, some example results. So this is a couple of models. This kind of shows some of the different things that we can get out of it to look to inform our restoration. So at the top left, there's the number of years to reach 5. Dark blue, light blue, yellow, gear, 5. So then we move over to oyster biomass. look and see how productive it was over a certain period of time. We got, total annual eggs spawned is, let's see, second one on the left. And the total annual recruit settled on the breed. The white ones, nothing, adult oyster density and sac oyster density. Again, talking about having birds, you want that, just robust adult oysters to provide lots of larvae. So results. So we take all of those 332 grid points and we put them into the chasm polygons, which are shown here. We just a good source settlements to kind of come back together instead of each individual 332 points to kind of get them something that makes sense. So on this next page, you can see these nicknames. I put chasm polygons. Above that is a connectivity matrices. So this on the left is the source location. So one of those larger polygons from, and top is the settlement location. You go on a diagonal, it's self settled. You can see there are some that the cross boundary 5 to 6 at Grand Isle, etc. And then on the right we have all sourced and all settled by year. Just going back, looking, 2018 was the wet year, which is expected, and 14 was the highest, and before the river really came up through it. So here's another way of looking at it. This is normal transport model results in the 4 years. On the left is the ones that successfully store harvest, so they put that power in somewhere. So which ones they were successful in sourcing it, and then on the right is successful settlement polygons. Which again, this is the average of all years. So that nice green that we saw that was 2016. You can see some of those first years took out some of the polygons there. Yeah, that was it. I think any questions of us on it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that. I will say very quickly, I'm often complimented on CPRA's slide presentations, but I will say I think your animation certainly elevated that. That was really cool to see. In terms of the committee, any questions, comments from Mr. Carter? Yes, please.
That's natural spat. So you just basically taking a sample of how many fish in the larva in the water columns.
I'm sorry.
For the larva transport routes. Basically just taking samples of the water.
It's predictive modeling. So we validated against, but we were validating against our self-assessment data, our meter square data, and stuff like that. This is based on what we know about those, so basically literature. The operations plan has 5 to 10. That's what drives the law. There's not us saying that there's this much larvae and we spread them out there. The model, this age reef can put full of these this much larvae. So first year, I think the smart ones that were on the beginning, this one who actually run the models, but I don't remember what the initial
Right. Yeah. I was
source
just
is,
kind
but
of, right.
as the years go on, it's driving. So
Right. That you have it.
Right. It's a predictive model. We have some data that once we get probably a little further look at. Yeah. It's strictly based off literature and what we know about it.
But I was just curious on that. The presentation just wasn't quite as shocking as the first.
I see what you did there.
I had to put
It will be seen. So this is, I tried to put some results in because it really, to review the full set of deliverables, handpicked a little bit here and there, but it will be, we will have the next meeting, and we'd be happy to maybe come back next year or something. I love you,
Court? Yeah, I had a quick question. That was some impressive data you had. So I noticed it was taken from 14 to 18. Do you think the migration patterns that the data show, that's what you're seeing nowadays? And do you have a more recent study that y'all planning to do more migration?
So it is a mechanistic model that we hope to be able to, but through those years, more well validated and verified due to the mid-Atlantic diversion. Yeah. Well, we could, we have to go on what's available. So I would put from that, but we did take it down to hourly. So we try to look at it differently, but it is validated. Just so as we get further along, which I know we're much along with verifying and validating hybrid models, we hope to find more funds to be able to run it again.
So I have a question. So Andrew Barron with Barataria Terrebonne National Estuary Program. Brady, you said at the beginning of your presentation that there is a decrease in oysters out there in our so right now, I know y'all aren't finished with the results and compiling all the data and everything, but right now, where are your PIs leaning towards in terms of the causes of this decline?
I'm only looking to inform where I want to put oyster restoration. Like where I want to restore oysters that are going. The idea is looking at these large and where it settles in sources that we want to on that overlap on the dry and make sure we have a protected sector that because we know it reaches here, reaches there, reaches there. When it's really dry, this one reaches here, here, and here when it's really wet. And that's how we maintain that connectivity and maintain the population. Yeah, this area, for years, we have this one doing great. And when conditions are right, we prove that they will migrate that way, but when the conditions are right. But as far as, I'm not looking at causes or anything like that. I mean, I have my own ideas, but this is strictly on. So Louisiana got $26 million in oyster specific funds from the consent decree. We got 15 million for early restoration, but with $26 million and the amount of issues we have, we have to be very, very strategic in where we place this little bit of funds. I mean, we hope we have funds down the road, and this will lead in great to when we do have additional funds on where we want to. Idea is maybe a complex. I mean, we're looking at it on estuary base, estuary look, but you could take it down to lake-based systems that are, that we see a connectivity and, redo that complex where you can get it through no matter what's thrown at it. We'll have something hopefully to get it through those hard times. But that's strictly what this is about, is just informing where we get the best bang for our buck and sustainable for the long term.
I have one more. So when y'all looking through the data, have y'all looked at comparing to other parts of the Gulf Coast, like Galveston, where they were affected by the oil spill as well, to see if they see the similar trends with the migration and decline in population?
And it's not like the larva or not. It's individual. It's so, we do have a region-wide oyster plan, but larva doesn't spread from here to Texas. Maybe Sabine, just because it's, right there, but I know everybody's struggling. Oysters are struggling, right? Yeah, Gulf, East Coast, it's something, yeah, right. I'm not sure what, but we do talk a lot in there. I think Alabama, Alabama may be doing something similar, but a lot of them are doing like we showed before, the habitat suitability, which looks at salinity and temperature, and that's really about it. And it's like that, it doesn't work for us. I mean, Louisiana's so open. I mean, we need something that shows where they're going and connecting, not just when it's dry. This area's great. When it's wet, this one's good. We need that in between as well. So we're hoping this is, and it sure looks promising. So we hope to construct a project based off of this, maybe next year, and then we'll really have something good to tie it together.
So you're modeling the current source reefs that are out there?
We
Or-
created our own source.
You created our
Oh
own.
yeah, they are identified. So that was our validation. Our reefs we have that we monitor validates the models.
Okay, so you're trying to see where you want to put more money for source reefs.
Yeah. So we have 1.7 million acres of seed grounds, and we know bottom classification of like 63,000 acres. So there's no way of doing it so specific to where we're using actual information of our reefs. We had to assume that anywhere, those squares, it's greater than 50% water. So, they could settle that. Like the water quality is good, but we don't know that there's hard structure.
Okay.
So that would
But
be,
if there was hard structure, they could
they would
settle down.
attach, yeah. And I mean, pollen, tire, whatever, there's something like that it'll attach to. But as far as like a reef, culture plant or something like that, that could come later. Like, hey, they're sourcing here, but we don't have hard substrate. So that could be an addition we do. But I think the main thing to start with is having these spawn and stock reserves higher, big. I mean, the few that we built were like riprap, come up off the bottom 2 or 3 feet, so you get, an instance of epoxy or something localized. It gets them through that, and they're not just sitting on the bottom where they're just going to die. So that's our brood reef concept. Put those in, get those established, and then if we see, we could add some culture plants here. They would catch these larvae. That's the hope. Is the complex idea is like start get your spawning oysters good, and then figure out how you want to build out wherever it is that we put. I'm talking way down in the future, but that's our.
So the
That's the
black
concept.
dots, the way you said they were dead, that means the water quality wasn't good, not substrate.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not, yeah. If it was, the water would have been good, they would have settled in it. Yeah. But it could be, that's it. Definitely. It's an assumption we had to make. There was no way around it. Yeah.
And one more. I guess eventually y'all gonna overlay survival, because I mean, the set's one thing, the larva setting, but it's the survival that's the determinant factor.
Yeah, so that's kind of what,
Yeah, I didn't, I
Some of
mean,
those-
went through a lot. I couldn't figure
yeah, I know, there's so much, and it's kind of hard to put this into. So I think this one too. So top right is number of years survived. Right. No, I'm sorry, top left. So the yellow is 5. So those made it all 5 years. Obviously, the boundaries, some of these fall into the Gulf, which, they could survive there, but nobody has, they're not going to settle and move in sand. So, yeah.
So the purple dots is primary survival. Now, when you're looking at the yellow, that's 5 years or?
They lasted every year that this simulation ran. Those reefs made it. Number of years reefs survived. So the blue though are the ones who should take 0 to 1. Again, this is all our first time looking at these. So I'm just trying to pick it up.
When we're saying survive, does that mean oyster 4 inches, 3 inches, or just the size, the set? Month, 2 months,
So
a
the
year, what's the
bottom
survival?
right is sac oyster density. The two at the bottom, adult oyster density and sac oyster density. So you can see, they survive, but flourish, probably not, because I would expect to see that all the same color if every one of them just
Right, yeah.
flourish, bump or crop every year. So again, once we get into it, there will be ways to pick it apart probably a little bit better, but it's
Still early.
yeah, that center area does well.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right, seeing none. Again, thank you, Mr. Carter. Appreciate both of you from LDWF and the presentations today. As we transition to an update from our technical working group, I'll call Ms. Danielle Riccardi up to give her report. Just a quick reminder for the public, please submit comments to coastal@la.gov. Again, coastal@la.gov. Put in the subject line DPAC, and we will read your comments out later in the meeting.
All right, so I'm gonna jump right into this. Gonna be talking first about our operations for Davis Pond in 2024. And then we'll take a look at some of the monitoring that we did that is related to operations, and then talk about the 2026 plan that we are proposing to you all today. And I'll also look at some of the 2025 data. A lot to cover. I'll try and go kind of quick. All right, so there are two different committees that help us make decisions with the Davis Pond diversion operations. The first one is the one that we have gathered here today. It's the Davis Pond Advisory Committee. And the main purpose of this committee is to advise CPRA's executive director, who serves as the DPAC chair, on information that's relative to the diversion's operations. Additionally, one of our main tasks today is to come to an agreement on the operations plan for 2026. Within the DPAC, there's a subcommittee, a smaller committee that is composed of a representative from each of the state agencies as well as from the Corps, and that's the technical work group. We meet about a month before this meeting to develop the draft plans, both for Davis Pond and for Carnarvon, that we plan to propose at these meetings. So some basic facts about the Davis Pond diversion. It was constructed by the Corps between 1997 and 2002, which is when operations began. It's located on the west bank of the Mississippi River in St. Charles Parish. It's composed of 4 gated culverts. The maximum discharge of the diversion is 10,650 cubic feet per second, and it is a gravity-driven diversion, which means its operations is dependent on the river stage being higher than the receiving basin. The water flows into a ponding area that's about 9,400 acres. And the intent really of this ponding area is to slow down the movement of the water to allow for nutrient uptake and sediment deposition in this shallow area before the water exits into Lake Catawatchee. Operations, maintenance, and monitoring is cost shared between the Corps and CPRA. It's a 75%, 25% split. There's a 50-year OM&M plan that is post start of operations. And as of 2025, we're in project year 24. It's about halfway through. And CPRA is responsible for managing the day-to-day operations of the diversion. So the primary goal of the diversion is to utilize a controlled Mississippi River diversion to reduce saltwater intrusion in the Barataria Basin, and by doing so, to maintain the estuarine gradient from fresh in the north to salt in the south. And the 3 main objectives that are intended to be met through operating the diversion are to enhance emergent marsh vegetation growth, to reduce marsh loss and to increase the productivity of significant commercial and recreational fish and wildlife. And so first, we're going to start with operations, and this is a great picture showing from the river, looking at the rivers closest to us, and then flowing down the outfall channel into the ponding area. So this is what our operations look like for 2024. We had one pulse that's kind of a higher pulse in the beginning and then a lesser pulse towards the second end. The pulse lasted 57 days, which is about 16% of the year. It was also closed 74 days throughout the year, about 20% of the year. And it was closed for multiple reasons, including in January, saltwater intrusion that we were still experiencing in the Mississippi River from the drought, different coastal flood advisories and warnings, low river stage. And then also in November, we had the culvert dewatering and inspection. So we had it closed for about 2 weeks then. Additionally, at the very end of the year, you can kind of see it, the diversion discharge drops off there. There was a tug that sunk in the Mississippi River close to the diversion intake. So we shut down for like a day or two then just to make sure there wasn't anything leaking that could get sucked into the basin. The mean discharge for the year was 1,564 CFS. Said two pulses, or it was one pulse, but first half was greater than the second half. And the maximum discharge was 9,650 CFS on February 8th. This graph looks at annual mean discharge from 2003 through 2024. In comparison, 2024 to 2023, we did pulse in 2024 19 more days than in the previous year. And also the mean discharge increased 11% from the previous year. So upped it a little bit. The long-term average is 1,808 CFS, so we are still below the long-term average. That was last exceeded in 2013. Right. This map shows the primary gauges that we use for determining salinity. These are the 4 real-time gauges that are maintained and managed by USGS. So the 2 primary ones that we use for operations include Grande Terre, which is our most southern station that is located on that red line, which is our 15 part per thousand established isohaline. And then the other gauge is Bay Dogri, which is located on the 5 parts per thousand isohaline to the north. We use Grande Terre from January through May and in December. And Bay Dogri is used as our primary gauge from June through November. We also have 2 reference gauges, Mud Lake and Hackberry Bay, that provide additional information about salinity in the overall basin and can also be used as a backup if one of the gauges goes down. This is our 2024 operations plan. We use a 14-day salinity moving average to plot salinity and to look at salinity within an operations range. That range is determined by calculating the 10-year monthly mean salinity, and then the range within that is plus or minus 1 standard deviation. On this graph on the left is when we use the Grande Terre gauge, and then on the right is when we use the Bay Dogri gauge. There is a low salinity trigger, which is indicated by the area that's red on the graph. So when salinity at either of these gauges at that time reaches the higher of either minus 1 standard deviation of the 10-year monthly mean or 5 parts per thousand, whichever is higher for that gauge, we need to go back to base flow. And for the Davis Pond diversion, our base flow is 1,000 CFS. Additionally, we have 3 consultation periods with Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. We have one in March for brown shrimp, and then we have 2 for oysters that extend from May through June and September through October. That's the main component of the plan. All right, so next we're going to look at our 2 primary gauges, and see how salinity looked for the year for those. So this is Grand Terre. It's the gauge that we use from January through May, and in December, it's the one that represents salinity at the 15 part per thousand isohaline. Looking at the 14-day salinity moving average, our annual mean was 20.8 parts per thousand. And then the mean that was calculated just when this gauge is used for operations was 21.2. And that time is indicated on the graph by like the bluish gray coloration. So a little bit higher than the 15 part per thousand. If you look at the 14-day salinity related to the range, and this is just during operations, we were within the range 54% of the time and above the upper range, so that +1, above the +1 standard deviation, about 46% of the time. And this is just calculated on when we had available data. Took a look also then at how much additionally we potentially could have pulsed the diversion, taking into account salinity in the basin, taking into account low river stage, because even if salinity is high, we can't pulse if the river's too low, taking into account when we had closures because of National Weather Service advisories, and the maximum additional number of days that we could have pulsed in 2024 is 64. Right, same analysis for Bay Dogri. Again, this gauge is used as our primary gauge to look at salinity to guide operations between June and November, and it represents salinity at the 5 part per thousand isohaline. The 14-day salinity moving average for the entire year was 8.4 parts per thousand, and then just when we were using this gauge for operations, it was 8 parts per thousand, so also higher than 5 parts per thousand. Again, it's represented, the time used for operations is represented by the shaded area on the graph. Then took a look at how the 14-day salinity moving average related to the actual range. When this gauge is used for operations, it was within the range 59% of the time and above the upper range 41% of the time. Did the same analysis we did with Grand Terre, where it looked at how many additional days we potentially could have pulsed if the river was high enough, and about 28 additional days maximum we could have pulsed over what we did during this time. It was nothing. It was 28 days. We didn't pulse at all during that time. Okay. These two graphs compare monthly salinity to monthly mean discharge and monthly mean river stage. The upper graph is discharge, and that is represented by the blue bars. The lower graph is river stage, and that is also represented by the blue bars. The lines represent mean monthly salinity at each of the 4 real-time gauges, so Grand Terre, Hackberry, Mud Lake, and Bay Dogri. So what we saw is in January, when the diversion was closed, we had a really low river at that point, less than 4 feet, and we had the highest salinity at all of the gauges at that time. Then going into February and March, that's when we were finally able to open the diversion. We had the highest discharge in February, second highest in March. Also, if you look down below at river stage, that's when river stage began to rise. So we see a drop at all of the gauges during this time, with more fresh water coming in from the north of the basin, as well as more fresh water coming in from the south in the river. Discharge then in April returned to base flow. So from April through December, we were just at 1,000 or less, around 1,000 or less CFS for that time. So the diversion really, from that point on, wasn't playing any real role in modifying salinity in the basin. Then if you look at the graph down below for river stage in May and June, that is when we had the highest river stage. You did see a decline between May and June in salinity at all of the gauges. But then river stage started to drop as we got into the end of summer and into fall, and it remained below or equal to 4 feet August through December. And during that time, salinity began to rise at all of the gauges. Also want to point out that while river stage I'm sorry, looking at these gauges, that first one should say discharge, which you probably saw already, but yeah, just to be clear. But additionally, tides, wind speed and direction, precipitation, all these things also impact salinity in the basin. Right, this map shows an interpolation of salinity from all of the gauges that we have in the Barataria Basin, and I think it's around, I don't know, we're around like 60. There's a lot of gauges. So all of those different points are salinity gauges, and it is this map is calculated based on the annual salinity at each of those gauges, and then salinity is interpolated between those points. So the main thing to note, I mean, it is fresher in the north. Blue is fresh, red is salty, particularly in the northwest. That's where we have the freshest conditions, and then saltiest in the southwest. Saltiest was 22.5 parts per thousand, and then the freshest was 0.1 part per thousand. You do see, if you look in the southeast, there's a freshening impact there from the Mississippi River water. And if you look at where our interpolated lines are for 5 and 15 part per thousand, they are both up basin of the target lines in 2024. The 5 part per thousand line varied in distance, but it was about 3 to 13 miles up basin of the target. So basin was more saline. And then the 15 part per thousand line was about 5 miles up basin of the target. Same thing, indicating more saline conditions. It was fresher though than in 2023 when we had a significant drought. So I included the 2023 lines on the map as well for comparison. I'm not sure how well y'all can see that, but the basin was fresher in 2024. Next, we'll talk a little bit about vegetation briefly. For analysis for this project, we looked at 2 different coastwide reference monitoring system stations that are both within the ponding area, and the ponding area is outlined on this slide in yellow. The Davis Pond diversion comes in through the north there, where it's marked. So CRIMS 3169 is the station that is more north on this map, and that one is in the direct flow path of the diversion. CRIMS 3166 is further south, and if we're pulsing at a high discharge for a good period of time, it does receive water from the diversion, but not so much as what we see at CRIMS 3169. So we're going to focus on that station for this presentation. One thing to point out, CRIMS 3169 has actually transitioned over the past maybe 15 years, 20 years from floating marsh to attached marsh to now a developing forest, as we're going to see in the data. And this station had just a marsh transect, but because of the developing forest community, we actually added a transect to measure tree growth in 2021, which is kind of unique for the CRIMS system. All right, so this shows vegetation cover at CRIMS 3169. It's the mean cover for each of the species. It's not necessarily important to see all of that, but the one thing to point out, the black color that is on the map, that is black willow cover. So you can see how around like 2013, we started seeing an increase in black willow at this site, and it's been increasing to the point where it's been our dominant species as far as cover since 2016. And canopy cover, again, we started measuring this in 2021 when we established the forested transect. It was 27% in 2021. In 2024, it increased to 57%. We also look at trees. We tag each individual tree so we can measure the individual growth of each tree. The number of trees increased from 77 in 2021 to 82 in 2024. They are all black willow, the ones that are big enough right now to be tagged, but we are seeing other woody species. There's baccharis, of course, wax myrtle, buttonbush, and red mulberry, which is great and really exciting. And I think probably the next time we do a survey, a forested survey, which will be in 2027, I think we'll probably start seeing some red mulberry enter into the number of trees that are tagged. Right. This slide shows what it looks like at the CRIMS site. It shows the transition over time. So in 2010, it was marsh. A lot of it was floating marsh. 2016, we started to see trees come in. 2024, the area is nearly completely forested. And if you look at the picture side of there, that's a soil core that we took at the site. So the top of the picture would be the top of the marsh, and then the bottom of the picture with the core would be deeper down in the marsh. And you can see the difference between the really organic brown sediments that are down, low in the marsh, and the fine silty sediments that are above that. And that is all inorganic mineral sediment deposition that has come in through the Davis Pond diversion. So it's been pretty incredible to see at the site. I know some of y'all have been able to actually come out and see the site and see these, this coring firsthand. This picture might have actually been taken on the trip that y'all were out at. So anyway, it's having a huge impact at this location. And did also want to point out that we are looking at quantifying land change within the ponding area. We have an analysis that we did pre-construction on 1998 imagery that USGS has done for us. And we are waiting on results from an analysis done on 2024 imagery, hoping to have that ready for the next report. If it's not in the next report, it'll be in the one after that. All right, next we're going to go through wildlife and fisheries data. A couple things to point out here. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries is the agency that has collected all of the data that we're going to be looking at. They collect wildlife and fisheries data for management purposes and to set seasons, as well as just looking at population size and understanding how different populations for different species are doing. All the fisheries data presented, it is fisheries independent monitoring, so it's collected from wildlife and fisheries stations and also from additional stations that CPRA has added specific for monitoring of the Davis Pond diversion. Want to point out that their data sets go back really far, some of them into the 1960s, and the data from the past 10, 11 years or so is the best for comparison because stations are most consistent during that time period, as is the methodology of data collection. All of the data are available through CPRA's online data portal, SIMS, and also this is a very general presentation of wildlife and fisheries data that I'm presenting. If you really want to get into the meat of it, Wildlife and Fisheries has multiple documents available on their website, and there's also a summary document that they provide for us every year that is posted on SIMS as well, where you can get a more general assessment of fisheries for each year. All right, so first we'll look at waterfowl. Wildlife and Fisheries conducts aerial surveys September, November, December, January each year. This year there was no flight done in September due to Hurricane Francine impacts. So the data are based on just 3 months of data. For 2024-2025 survey, there were 5,072 birds counted, total of 14 species, all of which are listed there in the table. Most of them were in fresh marsh, 80%, and most of them were surveyed during the January flight. Coots were the most abundant, followed by gadwall and blue-winged teal. I wanted to point out as well, black-bellied whistling ducks were the 6th most abundant species for this season, and none of them were counted during the previous season. So that was a new species that was added this year compared to last year. All right, so this shows the annual waterfowl data, the totals over years starting from 1997, 98 season, all the way through 24 and 25. One thing that is obvious here is that there has been a declining trend over years. The red line is the long-term average, which was 9,442 birds. One thing to note is that between 2023 and 2024, say the 23-24 seasons, we did see a 75% increase. So that's good. There was an uptick. The 21-22 season, the counts really declined, and that is likely due to Hurricane Ida impacts. So hopefully we're starting to see an upwards trend again. Also of note, with migratory waterfowl, the impacts expand, over the country, over the continent. They are not limited to Barataria Basin. So while conditions in the basin can influence numbers, the influence is much, much broader than the basin or even the state. All right, the next slide shows alligator counts. Wildlife and Fisheries also conducts annual aerial nest surveys for alligators. This is for the Barataria Basin. So in 2024, there was a decline from 2023, about a 28% decline, but still pretty high. We're just above the long-term average. There does appear to be a recent decline in numbers from that high that we had in 2019. But counts still look pretty good, and the previous 5 years had 4 of the 5 highest counts for alligators since 1998. Right. Oyster sampling is conducted through different types of methodologies, but this shows the square meter sampling that is done in July. That is the standard sampling that Wildlife and Fisheries does, and then CPRA added 2 additional sampling times, one in May and one in September or October as part of our swamp program. So what you can see on here is for first the July, the standard sampling, there was a pretty good increase from the previous season, increase of 269% for the total stock. There was an increase in both sac and seed oysters. Same with the May sampling that was done for swamp. We also saw a really good increase between 23 and 24. The September sampling, we saw a decline of 52%. And that was a decline in both sac and seed oysters. And this shows sampling. This is just the July sampling. This does not include the data from the swamp sampling. So 2024 seed stock increase is a 58% increase from the previous 10-year average, long-term average. And the 2024 sac stock was 303% increase from the previous 10-year average of 3,018 barrels. So nice increase from the previous year. Right, next, we'll look at brown shrimp. And brown shrimp did really well, according to these data. This is the dominant species landed during the spring inshore season. We saw an increase in all 3 gear types for the 50-foot seines, for the 60-foot trawls, and for the 6-foot trawls. For the 50-foot seines, we had the highest catch per unit effort since 1986. So it was the second highest recorded. Also looking pretty good for 16-foot trawls. And also, we saw a nice increase in the 6-foot trawls. It rose above the long-term average, and the last time it had done that was in 2018. For the white shrimp, this is the dominant species that's landed during the fall inshore season. We saw a decline in all three gear types, so 50-foot seines, 16-foot trawls, and 6-foot trawls. But the counts were still pretty good. Catch per unit effort was still pretty high compared to how it's been. Let's see. Yeah, so this for the 6-foot trawls, it was actually the second highest we've had since 1981. So it's looking good. And one thing I didn't point out with these other graphs is the area that is shaded, that blue color, that indicates the time since the start of operations for Davis Pond. We'll go through these pretty quickly. Crabs, we didn't see much of a difference from the previous year. Both were below the long-term average. In 50-foot seines, it was really close to the long-term average. Not much change from the previous year. Largemouth bass, not catching much in the locations where they do their sampling. They are found in the fresh areas of the basin. In gill nets, none were caught in 2023 or 2024 at these sites, and only 4 in 2024. Only 4 fish were caught in 2024. Very low catch per unit effort. Red drum, very similar to the previous year. It's been relatively stable. It has been above the long-term average for tremble nets the last 2 years. And speckled trout, we saw increases in both gill nets and in tremble nets. Gill nets rose above the long-term average. It's the first time since 2017. And in tremble nets, it's just below the long-term average. So some summary comments. The diversion was pulsed 57 days in 2024, which was an increase from 2023. The mean annual discharge was 1,564 CFS, also an increase from 2023, but still below the long-term average. The mean salinity in 2024 in the basin did decline from 2023, but it was still above the target isohalines. CRIMS 3169 has transitioned from a floating marsh to a forested habitat, which demonstrates just the impact that the Davis Pond diversion is having on land gain, on elevation gain, in the addition of sediment, good mineral sediment in the ponding area. And we will have a quantifiable assessment of land change, hopefully in the next 2 years to show everyone. Wildlife, waterfowl counts increased between the last 2 seasons, but still below the long-term average. Alligator nest counts declined, but still above the long-term average. Oysters, brown shrimp, and white shrimp catch per unit effort were relatively high in 2024, looked pretty good. And we also saw an increase in spotted sea trout, blue crab, largemouth bass, and red drum catch per unit effort remained low. And that's it for the monitoring.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. I just want to say very quickly, as I continue to be, I think, struck by the relatively simple goals of operating this diversion and the robust set of data that you, the staff at CPRA and the technical working group continue to evaluate to help paint a better picture for us on what's really happening out there and how we can be informed in our decision making. So with that, I'd like to turn to the committee for any questions or comments.
I'd like to go back to where you have the salinity levels where 23 and 24, where the difference was.
Did you want to go? Okay, stop me when I get to the.
Yeah, and just very quickly, please state your name for the quote.
Did you want this one or did you want the annual? Okay.
You know, the catch per average unit, I'll have this mic, but this year with on, but when the shrimp opened up, and I had wrote a letter with the High River coming up this year, I wrote a letter to Dory Dunn and the government about slowing it down. And what the problem was, salinity level was low all the way down more than it was prior. And what happens is the shrimp get right on the coastline and it stays so close to the edge that we don't have time to catch them. You know, shrimp, the only way we get a season is that the shrimp back up into the basin. And then as they come out, then we have a good season. But the way it was this year, The water was colder, the water was fresher, shrimp was small, and while I could probably tell you that the shrimp was 80 herds on the beach and on the offshore, the big boats was catching 80 herds. All our main core of our crop, we never got to go in. So that was a problem with that. And look, when the river was peaking at 25, 26, 27 feet, the diversion was running hard and it changed completely the basin. Completely. The salinity level never got to a point where the brown shrimp could even go in. So what happened was it just kept on the edge and we had a short season and we caught shrimp. But a lot of small shrimp. You know, in 2004, and 14, whenever it was down and it stayed down, the saline level was up. We caught 26 30s in that day. When I was a younger man, I've been fishing 50 years. I used to catch hoppers. I used to catch 26 30 brownies in there. We don't see any hoppers no more because of fresh water. We just want to see that from March to May, June, kind of slow down a little bit. Let our shrimp come in. Let them get into the basin. Let us have an opportunity for our shrimp to grow and have a season and not just be I know that you catch it pretty young after it was high, but when the season opened up, it wasn't like that for us. We didn't catch the shrimp they said they had. I know it was high, and it showed high, and even on the slide, it showed high. But when it come down to it, we had a short season because all our shrimp was on outside. So, you know, at that point, at that time, when our specs come in, our lava comes in, we have to give it an opportunity to get up into the basin where we have a season. If we keep that swing number 15 quarters, I know that's where it's at good for brown shrimp, but we're using the outside line for it, which is not giving it enough salt water up on the inside in order for them to go in overflow. We need these shrimp to get into the basin. If that don't happen, we don't make it. And we're having a rough time. I know we said we caught a lot of shrimp. Yeah, it was small, it was on the outside. We didn't have a good season this season on it as far as money wise because the shrimp was so small. And we have to have it where they go in. So I just like to make that point that the saline level needs to go further in at a higher level at 15 points. We have right on the edge of Grand Tier is 3-4 hours for us. It needs to be a little bit further in. I know I fish said 15 points per thousand for the brown shrimp, but that's not on the outside edge. That's getting into the basin. Let them get in the basin. We're using our own buoy in order for us to have a season for them. They don't go in and stay there a while and grow and come in out. We have short seasons and everything just goes out.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. We'll certainly continue to take a look at that. Danny, if you have anything to add or.
You're talking about 2025, right? Not 2024. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
You show what the saline level is lower.
Well, yeah, this is all 2020. I haven't shown any of the 2025 data yet,
Yeah.
but we are going to look at that.
Well,
Yeah.
when you look at it, it's clearly going to show it.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments, questions from the board, committee?
I do. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Maurice Stocking, recreational fisherman. One of my concerns is on the west side of Little Lake, there's a new pass that goes all the way to the intercoastal. And my concern is that freshwater saltwater is getting back up into Salvador probably a lot easier than it did in the past. Even some of the marsh on the north end of Little Lake has been degraded by Ida. Are we monitoring the freshwater, the saltwater getting into Salvador on a long-term basis? Because a lot of my guys are talking about the salinity level in Salvador, Cotahuachi, and in the Zalman's area.
Right. So we are monitoring that as far as looking at salinities and doing these sort of analyses that we do on an annual basis. And then we do have our real-time gauges, but we'd actually like to add another gauge in Salvador, because I feel like that's kind of an area where we could use real-time monitoring.
I think the southwest corner is where we need to really look at it. It's really where Ida went through and destroyed that whole marsh system. Mm-hmm. And there's a gateway that the saltwater can just go right through into Salvador now. And I think we really need to monitor that corner, Salvador especially. One of my concerns.
Angela Chong, NRCS. Great presentation. For both diversions, we have this ponding area for these freshwater diversions where sediment's building up, which is a great problem to have. Just wondering if there's an outfall management plan and what is that concern with getting waters into the system? And what are we going to do to look at doing outfall management with the land building considerations?
Right. We don't really have outfall management. You mean coming out of the ponding area?
Yeah, as that land builds up, is it naturally taking care of itself by forming channels?
Right.
So do we want to look at managing it so that the water goes in certain directions?
It's something that we've considered within the ponding area actually itself, because the water does really go down the main channels, and we wouldn't mind getting a little bit more of that going to the left, so that is, or to the west, so that is something we've considered. As far as outfall management from leaving the ponding area at this point, and John or David, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think for Davis Pond that has become a problem. But if we started having issues and if it started to silt in, we possibly have to, do some sort of excavation, as we did, like in 2009, where we had to actually make gaps to improve water flow out of the diversion or out of the ponding area. But I'm not aware of any real needs right now for outfall management. Can you all comment to that?
Yeah, I'll add some thoughts there. Good question, Angela. I've heard that question a few times, especially when we do field trips and people get to see the sediment accumulation in the Davis Pond ponding area. I think Danielle hit the nail on the head there that we have considered, but not officially yet. Just kind of talking about the ideas of maybe moving some water to the west, because a lot of it comes around the Finger Ridges and heads out. It's channelized almost out to the lake. While we are getting land building, you are seeing some shallowing up of the lake rim. So no, it is a concern, and it's not a bad problem to have. But we'd rather maybe keep it in the ponding area to build more land there. So, yeah, no, good thought. And again, welcome the committee to discuss that, or if there's other ideas. But yeah.
Any other questions, comments from the committee?
I know you're covering 2024 there. Do you have any idea what the pulse for 225 was?
I'm going to look at that. Yeah, I'm going to show you that after we talk
I'm
about.
sorry. Okay.
Yep, that's coming up.
All right, seeing no other questions or comments, we'll move on to agenda item number 6, the presentation of recommendations for 2026 Davis Pond Freshwater Diversion Operations Plan.
I love these pictures. This is taken from the diversion structure with the alligators hanging out, the water's flowing in. Okay. So everybody did receive the 2026 proposed operations plan, and for the most part, it's the same as 2025. There are a few exceptions. Updated the 10-year monthly mean salinity range. From 2015 to 2024, we use 10-year complete data set. That's one change. The other change is more just stylistic. The plan used to go from December through, December through November. And that's wrong. But anyway, the way we used to start it out, it did not follow the typical January through December timeline. And just to make things kind of clearer and to align with how we actually operate the diversion, kind of updated the graphs like this. Also, I felt like it almost, because we started Grand Terre in December, it went December through May, it almost seemed like we were potentially starting operations, and with the new operations plan before we all actually got to talk about it and decide on a new plan. So this, I think, just clarifies things. No actual change to the way we're operating, just how it looks. And then the other change was a result of our meeting last year, the last DPAC. There was a consensus from the committee that we should really work harder to maximize diversion operations, but while staying within the operation guidelines of the plan. So there was no recommendation to change how we operate, just to really look to make sure that if we can pulse at a certain time, to not hold back, to really look at what we can accomplish within the plan as far as operations. So this text was added, and I can read it. The 2024 Davis Pond Advisory Committee DPAC meeting was held on December 11th, 2024, to discuss and vote on whether to approve the 2025 Davis Pond Freshwater Diversion Operations Plan. During this meeting, it was proposed and overwhelmingly supported by the committee that the CPRA maximizes diversion operations to meet project objectives when it's feasible and within the plan's guidelines. So this 2026 operations plan acknowledges and incorporates the DPAC's recommendation. So this was added to the 2026 plan. Again, as far as the structure of the plan and our guidelines, it doesn't change any of that. It's just indicating the intent that was expressed by the DPAC last year. All right, so that's it for the plan. Those are the only changes that were made for 2026 for the proposed plan. What this shows is mean annual discharge through November 30th, 2025. So it's not a complete year. You can see 2025 there at the end. That's where we have start, there's a red star. So through November 30th, the mean discharge was 2,504 CFS. This is the highest annual mean discharge we've had since 2011. It was a 38% increase over the long-term average of 1,808 CFS, and that's the long-term average from 2003 to 2024. So we took the advice of the DPAC last year, we implemented it, and these are the results that we have so far for 2025. And then I don't know if anybody looks at CPRA's Freshwater Diversions website, but try and update these graphs every week. And what these show, it's kind of hard to see them. But the one on the left is for Grand Terre, and we recently, December 1st, switched back to that gauge. So you can see salinity is really high at Grand Terre right now, but we are unable to pulse because the river stage is too low. But one thing you can see with this gauge, if you're looking at the operations time when we used Grand Terre, which again is when it's shaded in, we were within the salinity range most of the time. We did get above the upper salinity range in April, and we did pulse during that time, but we were unable to actually bring the salinity down within range. And then if you look at Dobery, when we were using the gauge, that gauge, we stayed within the operations range pretty much the whole time then. So that's what the data look like for 2025 so far. And that's the end of the presentation. Now I did have this. Since I brought this up, I guess I'll show this real quick. This was in the report as well, but this shows the annual salinity at each of the 4 real-time USGS gauges from 2008 to 2024. It shows like 2023, the really high year when salinities were just highest that they've been since we've been operating these gauges. You can see it did come down in 2024, but it was still, a bit elevated. Actually 2022, 23, and 24, these years salinity has still been a bit higher on average than what we've seen in the past.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll stop and turn to the committee for any comments or questions on this year's operations plan.
I would like to see mine be more than March to May. June, very funny process. If it was like it was last year, the high river, where it was, we have issue. We have big issue. It's gonna come in and give time to get the extra. We have to have it. They're gonna have more time now. We can't control it where we can have a good season, that's one of our start-off season. We need that season. We haven't had a good season in a while. Especially in Beta Basin, going out that basin that we have,
Yes, sir. I certainly think we'll do that.
So AC Michael, and I just had a little sidebar before this. I think we may get to that. We talked about it in the Carnarvon committee meeting earlier. And we'll maybe try to have a mid-year meeting. If we do so, I think we can do a more detailed breakdown of the salinity and the, everything else, like pulling in shrimp data and pulling in, we can do a better look at it and all kind of have a better understanding of it. So I think that's a good path forward.
Anticipating good idea, I think, go ahead with it. I know they haven't seen for a while. Past president came a few times, we never got anything done. And I haven't been coming, but I'm just sort of coming with, this is a very serious issue, our industry at this time. We can't afford to lose money. We have 5 or 6 months out of the year that we can make a living. And if we can't be productive in years, we're gonna lose this industry. And it's time that we take a good look at all of them. It's not just building land. I know it's a big issue. I live in Texas. I have to rip. I'm losing more land than anywhere in this coast. So I know I'm 50 fishermen running around the whole coast. I know the coast and I see the laws. And can we stop it? I doubt that. Mother Nature's gonna take a course one way or the other. We can slow it down and probably be paid out of it. But you can't kill an industry or try to make land that Mother Nature's gonna take people. And look, I agree in coastal restoration. I live in that area and I lose more land than I've ever seen in my past. I've seen a lot more. I've seen a lot losing now. So just wanted to take the industry a little bit more and try to help us out, trying to get through
Casey, what months, what was your main concern? What months are you thinking?
From March through June.
Okay. I'm just looking at the salinities from this year, and like May, we in Little Lake, salinities were actually really high. Just looking at our data, this is the 14-day salinity moving average. So the Little Lake gauge that's the graph that's on the right. And it really, between April and May, in the beginning of May, was kind of high. Maybe that's not high considering what you consider high.
What is the normal rate for round trip survival?
To survive, it's a large range. Optimal is going to be just closer to 15. Yeah. But for them to survive, they can survive in a high range. But yeah, optimal would be around 15.
And just very quickly, if you wouldn't mind stating your name very quickly for the record.
Connor Lockfield.
Thank you.
Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries.
Appreciate that. I appreciate your comments. I think having that mid-year meeting is going to give us an opportunity to have more presentations, more data, and certainly strengthen our decision making. So thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments from the committee? We'll turn very quickly to public comments. Again, for anyone watching online, I would encourage you, please email coastal@la.gov. I'll invite any members of the public up to the podium. Please state your name, your affiliation. As members make their way forward, as the public makes their way forward, I am going to read one statement that we received through an email. This is from President Matt Jewell. Begin comment. Dear members of the Davis Pond Advisory Committee, I hope this message finds you well. Since I'm unable to join you in person today, I've asked our CPRA Director, Michael Hare, to share a few key points on my behalf. First, let me extend my sincere gratitude to this committee. At last year's meeting, I spoke to all of you about the vital role of the Davis Pond that Davis Pond plays in St. Charles Parish. The diversion helps protect our coastline within the parish, supports the broader basin's ecology and habitat, and benefits our local fisheries. It does all this by mimicking the natural processes that originally created coastal Louisiana, helping to restore the balance of fresh and salt water that sustains our region. In doing so, it helps sustain wildlife and provides crucial protection from hurricanes. In 2024, the diversion's output was higher than that of 2023, and the data from that year showed a positive impact on our fisheries. Oyster and shrimp populations did well under these conditions. While we await the full 2025 data, there is every reason to believe that continuing to run the diversion more consistently will benefit the Baratieri Basin without causing harm. Last year, this committee agreed to a resolution encouraging stronger operation of the diversion, and the 2025 data shows that that was exactly the right decision. We've operated Davis Pond at the highest level since 2011, and the system has responded exactly as designed. The basin has been able to handle these increased flows, and the data makes clear that the salinity remains on the salty side of the project targets whenever the diversion is not operated aggressively. That tells us we still have room and a need to continue operating the diversion at higher levels within the established criteria. In addition, as a CPRA board member and parish president, I have asked that CPRA begin the process of adding another diversion in the upper Baratieri Basin. This is important for the health of the overall basin, as it would further protect our wetlands and help maintain an environment we all depend on. So I want to thank you once again for your support last year. We've already seen the benefits, and I strongly encourage you to pass a resolution that would run the Davis Pond diversion as aggressively as needed to maintain the 5 and 15 parts per million salinity targets. Let's continue building on this momentum. Sincerely, Matthew Jewell, Parish President, St. Charles Parish, in comment. To any members of the public, please go ahead.
Alan Drake. I'm independent, semi-retired engineer. This is a repeat of the what I spoke about a couple of hours ago, but there's some new members here. And I've asked that the remaining handouts be given to any people that were not here a few hours ago. Everybody has good things to say about mangroves. The roots capture silt. The roots also provide a habitat for a variety of sea life. The above ground trees provide additional friction for both wind, and they also slow down storm surge a little bit, even though that may knock them down. It takes energy to knock down a mangrove tree. My proposal for the 29 master plan, which can also be implemented here independently of the master plan, is to provide two aspects that are unique. One is to provide free mangrove seed to commercial fishermen and scientists who understand best the water flows and salinity and opportunities. And the other one is the understanding that dead mangroves still provide a lot of benefit. The wood is rot resistant. I've asked mangrove experts how long a dead mangrove lasts, and the only answer I've gotten is over a decade, provided they're of sufficient size. It seems like if you can wait 4 years between frost, killing frost, that the tree gets to be useful size. Now, the bigger the better. But if we can simply avoid a killing frost 4 years after a mangrove has been seeded, it will provide a useful benefit at that stage. So I'm suggesting that we more aggressive than nature does, expand mangrove anywhere we can. And I think the commercial fishermen are a free source if we just give them free seed and also scientists. We can do it at a very cost-effective benefit. How much the benefit is, we don't know. But I think that the minimal cost to provide free seed compared to the many millions that are spent on other structures, it's worth doing. And if you did it in the Davis Pond and Carnarvon, this would provide data for the 2029 overall master plan. Thank you.
Thank you again for that presentation. Any other comments from the public?
Yes, my name is Clyde Maddox, and I'm not here to represent anybody except myself. I'd like to first thank all of y'all for taking the time out of your day and spending as much time as you do in making this happen. I really don't have any complaints about the way the diversion is being run. My mother used to say that the tragedy of money was when you need it, you don't have it. When you have it, you don't need it. And that's what I'm seeing with this diversion. You know, when we really need, to divert fresh water into the upper Barataria Basin there, we don't have the ability because of the level the culverts are set to siphon this into the system. And I lost my star witness, Corey Gavin. She was a project manager in planting, I think, in excess of 1 million cypress trees in the Salvador Game Management area. And I was talking to her before she jetted out the door there earlier. And she told me that I asked about mortality rates, and she said, well, we've lost a lot because of saltwater intrusion. Now, we're talking about within a mile or two of where that diversion actually gets out of the ponding area. And so, we've done a great job at managing to do no harm. I'm sure that the harsher people in this represent the room, have feelings and ideas about the salinity levels and how it's impacted by sea habitat loss due to hurricanes having as great an impact as these salinity levels. What I wish we had, because it's a freshwater diversion system, is a way to actually measure fresh water. And what I mean by that is that where we need it in the upper Barataria Bay, I'm talking about Lake Salvador or further north, we don't have that ability. And we have this constant cycle that I spoke about last year between storm surges and droughts where it brings in salinity levels and it just crashes the whole ecosystem there. And y'all are all experts in your field. Oh, look who's here. Quickly, how many cypress trees have y'all planted on Salvador Game Management area?
On Salvador Game Management area, we planted 200 trees per acre. We planted 18,000 acres. I'm Corey Gavin from Eco Restore. I work with Restore the Earth Foundation. And
did you find that the mortality rate was affected by saltwater intrusion in some of these areas?
We feel like it is. We did a survey prior to the hurricane in 2024 in July, and we had a 92 to 95% survival rate. We just completed another survival study in October and November of this year, and in lower places on Salvador WMA, we found that there can be salt sinks there. So that's what we're assuming. We haven't done any soil testing or anything, but it did look like saltwater damage.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that information.
You're welcome. So one of the things that I noticed from the presentation was that the upper monitoring location salinity was 8 parts per thousand. Cypress trees can't go beyond 7 parts per thousand. So that's just,
well, we have a great monitoring system.
We do.
To make sure that salt, no, I'm talking about further south.
Yeah.
Basically, this whole system is set up to say, let's do no harm.
Right.
So it's not saltwater intrusion, it's freshwater intrusion.
Freshwater
So we're monitoring freshwater intrusion, where we need to be monitoring saltwater intrusion. And so if you're like my neighbor's grandson, it was great. He got his limit of redfish. Unfortunately, he was fishing bass. And I feel for the shrimping industry and the oyster industry and how they're impacted. But think about the guy selling baits, the guy, St. Charles Parish has just committed $4.7 million, I believe, to build a boat launch there. So if you want to catch speckled trout and redfish, and you just come on to Zalman's and you're going to be able to do it because that's what you're going to be fishing for. The surveys say 0 bass. And so, we don't see the boats at the boat launch. We don't see the tournaments. We don't see them at the bait shops. And it's had a huge impact. And I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I don't have a graph or a pie chart to tell you that, the economic impact by this compared to the commercial fisheries. And I certainly don't want this to be an us or them situation. I just want to find something that we can do to help us all. I certainly wish we had the ability to move water when the river's low and we really need it, but unfortunately we don't. So, there's a tremendous amount of power and there's a tremendous amount of influence in this room today. And so what you're doing with this diversion this year, last year, I think is fine, because I think you don't have the ability to really impact the saltwater intrusion, which was what this diversion was set up to impact. But there are some things we could do for a very small amount of water of monetary investment compared to some of these other projects. If we could direct that water from the guide levee there, not out into Lake Salvador, but if we just open up a couple of cuts into the canals, we could actually move all of this fresh water up into the interior of Salvador Game Management Area. And it impacted our duck population last year, holding in that area tremendously, where the whole concentration of people was in one pond that was set way back off of that channel that moves water between Lake Cotahuachi and Valle de Almas now, and intrudes salt water into there, killing the vegetation. But if you look at the duck count, I mean, we've got 1,000, here again, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but the amount of boats I see going out of Valle de de Almas, you got 1,000 duck hunters chasing 1,000 ducks in the survey. So what are the odds there? So, I don't sit on the advisory council. I wish I did, because, ideas like moving that freshwater up into our freshwater ponding system in the Salvador Game Management Area would be very, very minuscule compared to some of these other projects St. Charles Parish has on their wish list. But that is part of the hydrology project to redirect some of this water. But we could simply go up to that water and go up the West Canal there into the the Gulf Canal that comes almost to the edge of that game management area. And then we could move that up into the interior and stop that saltwater intrusion. Thank you very much. I'd love to see us freshwater diversion actually work when you needed it on the northern end into Lake de Almas, but I'm 66, so I might never see that in my lifetime. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Yep, thank you very much for your comment. And certainly, I think it reinforces what we'll discuss in our new business for that mid-year meeting and additional presentations. Ms. Shaw, I assume no additional comments online? Any additional comments from the public?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah, just a quick reminder, state your name and affiliation. Thank you.
Yeah, how y'all doing? I'm Casey LeBlanc. I live in Zalmans. I own a crab dock. 25 years. I'm one of the bigger crab docks in Louisiana. I know a lot about the marsh. I know a lot about the diversion. I don't lease land from the north, from into that Lake Zalman to the south, coming all the way back to Salvador. Right now, I'm leasing 6,500 acres right there by the bridge where my factory's at least 650 acres in Mud Lake. I was in the marsh this morning, and when I leave here, I'm going to bring my wife on deer this evening in the marsh. I got ditcher machines, I got videos on Facebook, and we keep talking about this diversion. And when it first came, it was supposed to be in Lake Zalmas, but the catfishermen, they didn't want it because our catfish were really known. The catfish of the river ain't got the quality that they have in the volume. I used to buy catfish. The big ones, they didn't want them on the river because the big catfish go to Texas, they freeze them whole, they cut them into steaks, and they dry them and send them to Nigeria. Catfish in the river has a high oil content because of the soybean and everything. They clean out the barges and throw in the river. We also buy the soybean out the barges for deer too. But they did not want no fish out the river. They just don't work for the process. So the catfishing did not want that diversion Lake Zalmas. So it moved to where it's at now. Guess what? All the catfish ran over there and started fishing in the diversion because the fish didn't have the oil. They're not really coming to the diversion, they were coming to feed on the diversion, and the food that came there purged quickly. So now they all fish over there. So they wouldn't have spoke up, we'd probably have it Lake Zalmas. And then Danielle was talking about
the Saline River gets too high and they can't use that water because it's got salt content. We need the diversion of Lake Zomans to counteract that further up the river to get some flow that way too. I fish sockeye in Lake Zomans. There is no more sockeye. Ida wiped them out. They never recovered. I got live scope, but the catfish are super thick. You have barnacles on all the trees. You try to fish, and the barnacles got your rope down. And the catfish are piling up because they're getting cornered back there. And some of the shrimp, like I said, I'm a seafood industry. I was getting shrimp 2 years ago at the Ida off the back of the dock. Like, it was unbelievable. Them storms bring in seafood. Wildlife Fisheries got trip tickets. Every hurricane, our catch goes up for like 2 get banned a year. Crabs, shrimp, everything. Comes in, the storms bring all that into our estuary. Seeds it all. I mean, a storm like 3, 4 years, 5 years. And you can see the effect. But I'm really for the diversion. And when I say I've been in the diversion, I got an airboat. I done shot neutrals in the reserve for wildlife fisheries for like 8 years, me and Forest West. And I'm gonna tell you what's very unique about this diversion. The neutrals thrive. Why do they thrive? I'm gonna tell you why. The water goes one way. When one dies of a disease, it goes out. When it dies of disease, where I hunt at in the marsh in Lake Zomans, it's in a pond. It dies, the disease stays there. The water goes up and down, moves like this, but don't go one way and flushes it out. The diversion really does keep everything moving, and everything thrives in there. Unbelievably thrives. Not like around the surrounding area. Like what the Maddox was saying. You got canals that they can dig and clean out, that it is overgrown, shallow, and move some of the eddy current toward Lake Zomans through Salvador management area, feed some more that way. We can take in water from other directions, and I'm not saying push the salinity level back. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying we need other ways to come from different directions. And I'm really for that project. I hope y'all to consider putting one in Lake Zomans. We also talked about maybe digging that canal by Lake Buff and running more current down by Lafourche and try to get someone to come to the Lake Buff area and come around. And back in the day when we were kids, they had grass everywhere. Mother Lake had a trail you had to stay in to get outboard. The lake was solid grass. Lake Zomans, Kalawachi was solid grass. Highway 90, Pier 90, they had so many boats to launch and to go fish, they would block up the highway on both sides of the highway. Now go over that, you have 5 boats. There's no more grass, no more underwater grass. Underwater grass stops the wave action and breaks the wave down before they even hit the bank to start erosion. When you got that underwater grass like mats, they'll stop the wave way before it even gets to the bank. A lot of our grass out there is python, kite grass, all freshwater grass. Once the saltwater kills that, the erosion just goes exponentially. And pretty much what I had to say. Oh, and that thing, alligators. I buy alligators too. I buy live crabs and live crawfish. I buy dead alligators. I don't buy live alligators. Jerry Savoy is a good friend of mine. This year we're looking at the map, and he's very, every nest got a break coordinate, how many eggs on the map. And we're looking at the maps, and I'm like, Jerry, I thought you had all this area further south, further toward the Gulf. I said, don't you go, yeah? I said, you don't pick up eggs on it? He goes, there's no more eggs there. The alligators been migrating north to the salinity levels. They migrate north, and he got, how many years he been doing this? He got documentation on all that. And it shows just, pretty much, it's self-explanatory when you look at it and you see like, oh my God, look, they get more and more when they're moving north. And that's a few things I had to say. I probably had more, but I forgot, but.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, any other comments from the public?
Hey, good afternoon, Paula Glover, Restorer Retreat. Nice to see several of you again in the past 48 hours. Captain Casey just said a lot of what our base has been asking us to come here today for past 48 hours. Several members of the community reached out and asked that we make an appearance here today to share with you the similar concerns that Mr. Maddox and Captain Casey have just said about operations of Davis Pond, with concerns for the increased salinity levels, particularly in the northwestern part of the Barataria Basin. Restorer Retreat, for those of you who are not familiar, has been around in existence for 25 years, primarily focused on the Barataria and Terrebonne basins. And that is a group of landowners and community members representing average ordinary citizens all the way up to members of agriculture, oil and gas, and so on and so forth. We continue to support the operations plan as it is, but we would also ask that you look at increasing salinity levels, decreasing salinity levels while increasing the freshwater input into the upper basin, so that the concerns with regards to the migratory waterfowl, the fisheries, and the decline in vegetation starts to be addressed. We greatly appreciate the work of this committee. We're certainly here to help you. You all can certainly reach out to us, and certainly happy to connect you with the fishermen that seek out our help as we continue to support diversions. Additionally, echoing what Parish President Matt Jewell said, we would support an additional diversion in that upper basin to help keep some of that pressure off of the land loss that's occurring in the upper basin. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
Yes, Clyde Maddox again. I probably exceeded my 3 to 5 minutes, but I just want to make one more point and leave you with this thought today. We talk about salinity averages, but if the average oxygen level in this room, and if this room was a closed system like that estuary is, it might be 19%, but if we shut off the oxygen to this room today, it's really not going to affect the overall percentage of oxygen levels throughout the year. But when it comes to an ecosystem, just like this room, if we create an environment it cannot survive in for a very, very short period of time, just like, we cut off the oxygen, everybody's dead. Think about how long it would take to put together, once again, the amount of resources and the years and years spent pursuing these, ecological plans. How long would it take to recoup that amount of knowledge? And basically, that's what we're experiencing in the upper Barataria Basin is, when you basically kill the entire ecosystem. This isn't something we go, 2 or 3 weeks from now. It takes years to recover. And lately, we just had this cycle of episodes that it never does completely recover, because now between the amount of salinity coming up and anaerobic respiration when we get storm surges, it just never does quite recover. But that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments? Again, none online. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda number 8, which will be a vote on the 2026 Davis Pond Freshwater Diversion Operations Plan. I'll ask the committee for a motion to approve. A second?
Second.
Any discussion by the committee on the operations plan? Seeing none, I'll turn to Mr. Troutman for a roll call vote.
Okay, thank you. You're fine. Okay, I'm gonna call your, who you're representing and maybe part of your name. Give me a yes or no on whether you accept the plan as is, and that was the motion. Okay, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Michael?
Yes.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Kathy Bro?
Yes.
NRCS, Angela?
Yay.
Nay, yeah. EPA, Roll?
Yes.
Dawn Davis, Noah? Conservation and Energy, Sarah?
Yes.
Wildlife and Fisheries, Jason?
Yes.
DEQ, Jeff?
Yes.
St. Charles Parish, Marty?
Yes.
Yes. Lafourche Parish was not here. Jason Smith, Jefferson Parish?
Yes.
Plaquemines Parish, Kimberly Buck? Yes. Yes, all right. Oyster Fisheries, Pete? Shrimp Fisheries, Lower Basin, AC?
No.
And Recreational Fisheries, Maurice?
Yes.
Yes. Not there yet. Let's see, Bidnap, Aaron, Andrew? Yes. And then Marsh Property Owners, Frank?
Yes.
Yes.
And by a vote of 14 yeas and 2 noes, the operations plan is approved. We'll move on to new business. Maybe ask John, we kind of relive that discussion we had at our previous committee meeting.
Yes. So at Carnarvon, it was suggested, and we thought, we kind of heard the suggestion before the meeting, but it was officially recommended by the Carnarvon Committee to have kind of a mid-year meeting. And so it would be more of a kind of a workshop where, kind of like you saw today, where Wildlife Fisheries did a couple of presentations, but we would bring in representatives, either you at the table with your expertise, or outside researchers, maybe from the university, and even partners that want to present data that are relevant to the diversions. And that workshop would then inform you as a committee, inform the public if they choose to attend, and then also, because of the timing of that committee, would inform the technical work group, who, as you're aware, develops the initial draft of the plan that we just approved today. So I guess really the ask, just for discussion purposes, is if this Davis Pond Committee would be willing to do the same. And we'll open that up for discussion.
Yes, I think it's a great idea. I'd love to participate in whatever.
Okay. So you're first on the list to present.
Might not like what I have to say, no.
Yes, Marnie Stein with St. Charles Parish. Great idea. We'll be there. Thank you.
And Marnie, if I do remember last year, Matt said he wants to host that.
Yeah.
Super duper.
Yeah, got it. Any other new business by the committee? All right, seeing none, as we go to wrap up, I just want to thank everyone for being here this morning, both members of the 2 committees as well as the public. Really appreciate your engagement, as this was my first committee meeting. I look forward to continued engagement with all of you and making sure that we're using these resources and these investments to the best of our ability. And before calling for a motion, I do want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a happy holiday season, and a very safe New Year. With that, I'll ask the committee for a motion to adjourn. Motion, do we have a second? And a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.